Hey, everybody. How you doing? Welcome, everyone, to the 2023 AIA Baltimore and Baltimore Architecture Foundation Spring Lecture Series. My name is Martina Riley. I am the 2023 president of AIA Baltimore. We're excited to be bringing you this program in person today at this fantastic new venue. Yeah, applause. I heard it. Good. Yes. All right. It is great to bring our community together again, face to face, sharing knowledge and being able to spend time to reconnect after the pandemic. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We are very happy that you are all here. The lecture series is celebrating its 45th anniversary this year. The series brings nationally and internationally recognized speakers to talk about design in relation to a timely theme and to draw connections to relevant issues here in Baltimore. Founded in 1871, AIA Baltimore is among the oldest AIA chapters in the US. We represent nearly 1,300 architects, emerging professionals, educators, and allied construction industry members united to demonstrate the value of architecture and design across our region. The lecture series is co-sponsored by the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, and I'd like to now pass it off to the 2023 BAF President, Nikita Reed.
All right, well, thank you, Martina, and thank you all again for coming. I'm just putting on, I think I'm supposed to advance the slide, Nia, to the, maybe? Sure, okay. No, is it the click? It's the click, there we go. All right, it's the click. All right, so again, welcome. So my name is Nikita Reed. I am the 2023 BAF president, as Martina said. And so the mission of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation is to celebrate design in the built environment. BAF encourages people to explore Baltimore architecture and design, to be mindful of its history, and also to recognize its architectural heritage, and appreciate the design innovations that have come from the city. BAF, through its tours, lectures, exhibitions, publications, and educational programs, demonstrate how ideas are manifest in the built environment and the urban design of the city. We do have a couple tours coming up this summer, and I do hope you'll join us wherever we end up in the city. The lecture committee has done a fantastic job of curating this series, and I think you're in for a treat. I'm really glad that you're here, and so now I'll turn it over to some of the folks who've made this night possible.
Hello, thank you guys. I have the honor of thanking our sponsors for tonight. But before we get started, my name is Nia Young. I'm a co-chair for our lecture series this year. And I want to take a moment to thank some of our sponsors because this series is a three-part series and it wouldn't be possible without some of the support of our sponsors. So also thank you, Nikita and Martina, for that warm welcome. Let's see. We are glad this year to continue our partnership with major sponsor, the Maryland chapter of ASLA. Thank you for your continued support. A special thanks to our supporting sponsor, Dilbert Adams Construction. Thank you to our capital sponsor, KCI Technologies. We would like to thank the following three Corinthian level sponsors. We have Swornow Building Systems, thank you to BCT Design Group. And thank you to Klein Agency. I'd like to thank Mosley Architects, our iconic level sponsor, and Whitney, Bailey, Cox, and McNanny, our Doric level sponsors. Lastly, I'd like to recognize our annual sponsors. This series and many other AIA Baltimore series and AIA Baltimore events wouldn't be possible without their continued support. If you would like more information about our 2023 lecture series sponsors, please visit aiabaltimore.org for a link to our online publication. Thank you to our sponsors. Okay, now I have the honor of introducing our amazing speakers for tonight. They will be speaking to our lecture series theme. The theme explores infrastructure and connections. We are glad to bring to you this year's lecture free and in person. Our lecture series theme this year recognizes that the pandemic has taught us all the value of our time outdoors and how much we take for granted public space. Under the theme of NextGen connections, in considering national conversations surrounding the Green New Deal, new infrastructure funding, and renewed appreciation for public space, tonight we have invited our speakers to explore the national trends and emerging strategies through a conversation about Washington, D.C.'s 11th Street Bridge. On that note, I'm honored to introduce Haley Boyce. I'm going to give you a few bios, one moment. Haley Boyce is a landscape architect and a member of ASLA's Council of Fellows and a partner at Olin Studio. Haley's focus is the design and planning of landscapes that weaves together the elements of art and ecology, creating greater social and physical resilience for cultural institutions and communities both in the US and abroad. She finds her passion in creating educational opportunities through the medium of landscape that engages current and future generations. Also promotes stewardship and addresses key issues such as climate change, equality, and environmental justice. Haley's award-winning work includes the design of courtyards, plazas, gardens, parks, campuses, and waterfronts. Recent projects include the Brandywine Conservancy and Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Art, and the National Museum of American History. We are also joined tonight by Jason Long. Jason Long is a partner at OMA who leads the New York office. Since joining the firm in 2003, Jason has brought a research-driven interdisciplinary approach to a wide range of OMA's projects, both nationally and abroad. A number of projects under Jason's direction take a creative approach to adaptive reuse and preservation, including the Houston, a museum which transformed a building which transformed a former post office warehouse into a mixed-use hub. Jason's portfolio also includes works such as the renovation of the historic Fitzgerald's building at the University of Toronto into the university's administration center, the adaptive reuse of New Jersey's historic Pathside building into Center Pompidou, and Lantern, the reimagination of a former commercial bakery into a community arts hub in Detroit. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Jason and Haley.
Oh, now we're like at the end. Oh, good job. But maybe we.
No, that's not the
Oh, no, 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 it is the beginning. I'm just gonna try to do this thing again. I just reappeared.
If you drag it, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thanks so much for being here today. It's a beautiful day, so you're sacrificing a bit of good early summer outdoor time to be with us, and we really appreciate it. We're going to be presenting a little bit in a tag team style. We're mainly showing the 11th Street Bridge Park, a project that Hallie and I have been working on for nearly a decade, which is kind of scary to think about. And we're finally, hopefully, approaching construction towards the end of this year. So it's an exciting but very slow moment. We'll start by talking a little bit about both of our respective firms and then get into the project as a whole. Okay, so as was already mentioned, I'm a partner at OMA based in the New York office. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, although sometimes, because I don't know why, but people think I'm Dutch, but I'm not. Thankfully, maybe. In any case, maybe you know our work, but we're doing work globally all over the world, kind of trying to do work that at every stage of since the founding of our firm in the mid-70s tries to kind of push thinking about architecture forward in various different ways in a variety of typologies. We have offices in Rotterdam, where we were founded, but also in New York, Hong Kong, and Brisbane. And although each of these offices more or less covers a geographic zone, we also try to dabble a little bit and get around wherever we are. The current kind of regime of the New York office has been there since 2006. And in that time, we've tried to build up a kind of portfolio of projects that run the gamut of typologies and scales and really different regions and everything else. As a global firm, when we have different satellite offices, we try to have each of those offices be semi-autonomous in the sense that we're developing work and doing the creative work all kind of in the place itself. We came here initially for a project at Cornell University that expanded the architecture school there with a square-shaped building that floats above a road in order to provide a platform for students to work. And I think this project, in a way, also pointed towards the direction that we've gone in, at least in part, meaning that we're engaging constantly with existing conditions in a quite aggressive and unapologetic way. This work. And while, of course, as I showed on the previous slide, we're doing ground up projects and museums and office towers and residential towers. One of the key things we've been looking at also, and especially that I've been looking at, is adaptive reuse projects, as was already mentioned. So doing things like transforming a parking garage into a synagogue, or as we'll discuss later, kind of bridge piers into, well, from bridge to bridge, but now bridge park. And of course, our ambition as architects is often to rethink how things can be and to invent a new way of even being human, maybe. But when it comes to these sorts of adaptive reuse projects, that's often a slightly more surgical operation, but one that hopefully has a kind of also market or even more dramatic impact. So, for example, we're working in the East Village neighborhood of Detroit to transform a former bakery complex that's now kind of quite dilapidated into a home for two arts nonprofits, as well as a kind of potential zone for a grocery or other local serving retail space. Kind of treating it very minimally. We're not trying to kind of leave a big mark, but transforming a currently roofless space in the middle of the building into a courtyard that can be a gathering place for the occupants of the building, but also for the community as a whole. And then on a blank facade, we're actually drilling 1,500 holes in order to create a perforated kind of screen that telegraphs the new life inside the building without undermining the solidity of what was there before. In Houston, we recently finished a project that transformed the historic Barbara Jordan post office on the edge of downtown Houston into a kind of mixed-use center, taking a building that's almost 1,000 feet long and carving into it in order to both divide it into different parts, but also bring life into it and bring life up onto its roof that has become a kind of major gathering space and green space within the city. While within the building, a food hall and other programs help activate and draw people into the whole complex and where they can enjoy themselves. Of course, reusing spaces is not just about reusing building, it's also about trying to reclaim urban spaces that have been neglected or forgotten. For example, in Greenpoint, we've been working together with developers in New York to help transform the former industrial waterfront at the north end of Brooklyn into a new home for people, envisioning a master plan for that could help bring people to this edge of the water, but also bring the neighborhood as a whole to it. And we recently completed 2 towers that are at the hinge point, you could say, of this overall development. 2 towers that are kind of nested together and that simultaneously help connect the neighborhood back to the waterfront. And here our effort was obviously to build a new building, but one that we could shape in a way that could be where the 2 towers that we're building could be linked together, but also where they, despite their height and their scale, could try to work together with the scale of the surrounding existing neighborhood, while at the same time bringing that neighborhood closer to the water.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually from Baltimore originally, so it's really wonderful to be back in the city and to see everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Hallie Boyce, design partner at Olin. And as a landscape architect, our team works really at the intersection of both natural and cultural systems. And our mission is to design places that nurture culture or strengthen culture and ecology towards a more equitable and resilient future. More and more, we find ourselves working with communities, and communities in particular who are underserved. And so that's a real passion for our team presently. We are based in Philadelphia and Los Angeles and work across the globe as well. We have a number of embassy projects and other projects abroad. Our team is a very talented and energetic group who are very passionate about the current issues of the day: climate change, equity, and health. And we pull talent from a number of different universities and colleges. And we really have a culture of teaching both in the studio and outside the studio at a number of these places. Have visited Morgan State and University of Maryland, but would love to come back again in the future. We have a research team called Olin Labs, and this is a sort of lab, 5 different labs: people lab, eco lab, design lab, tech lab, and so on, which really works to knit, see the larger themes in our work between projects, and then allow for proactive research. One of our recent projects was soils that you might have heard about, which is this idea of repurposing recycled glass as soil medium. So I just wanted to share with you briefly some related projects to 11th Street Bridge. Olin has been really working in the public realm and on civic and cultural sites for over 40 years. We are an 80-person strong team now, and we are really continuing that legacy. We find ourselves, though, more and more in the face of climate change and some of these other issues of equity and health, which we think are highly connected, working at the larger scale. And to today's theme, or this evening's theme, more of an infrastructure, landscape as infrastructure, and more planning projects. A key passion, as you can see here, is parks and waterfronts. That's the Pier 26 project in New York. And that was a project designed with biohabitats from here in Baltimore. Closer to home, this is Philadelphia. We work on urban plazas. This is Dilworth Park, where we took a sunken plaza and brought it up to grade. It sits over train lines, as you can see in the upper right, and with connections down, really providing a beautiful gateway to that system, but also a flexible plaza that allows for celebrations and activities throughout the season, throughout the year. In Ohio, I worked on the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, working to create a memorial grove and garden there that expands their exhibitions, which honor the service of veterans across the nation. But what's really wonderful about this organization is they're offering social, educational, and recreational opportunities that will connect veterans across the country. And this just shows you that memorial grove, which also acts as a public park. And the opportunity also for ceremonies, particularly on key dates such as Memorial Day and Veterans Day, are held in the garden. At the Akron Art Museum, we took a parking lot and transformed that into a terrace space that invites the community in for performances and expands the museum's activities. The U.S. Embassy was a project, it was really a catalyst for future development on the south bank of the Thames River. We worked on that for several years, recently realized creating meadows, woodlands, and wetlands that symbolize the horticultural connection between our two countries. And also created a series of garden spaces within the building that provides social connectivity, air, and light. As I said, the larger scale, we've been working on projects such as the LA River Master Plan. It's 51 miles long, 2,300 acres, and there's 1 million people living within a mile of this spine. This involved extensive community engagement and input, and used that basis to craft the master plan, and identified 9 goals that are used, or lenses that are used for the decision-making process. Again, back in Philadelphia, we've worked on transit-oriented development, such as the 30th Street Station. Out in Indiana, we've worked on Origin Park recently, which is a 400-acre site, an ecological restoration, also with reforestation, meadows as well. And this will be a vibrant park, but also key to their resiliency strategy. In Connecticut, Mill River Park was taking a once channelized with a concrete edge river that was very polluted and refreshing it, working with the Army Corps to make a softer edge that allowed for connectivity across the river, similar to the 11th Street Bridge Park. And in Florida, looking at Curry Park, this brings together 5 different neighborhoods in Northwest Palm Beach, which did not have a strong connection to the coastal waterway. So it's providing a variety of waterfront activities to draw the communities together. And then finally, as I said, Pier 26, which was very much a collaboration with biohabitats, reaches out over the river and celebrates the ecological history and section of the Hudson River estuary. Now, turn it back to Jason.
Hi again. Now we'd like to talk a little bit about this project that we're collaborating on together, the 11th Street Bridge Park. So this is a project I mentioned already. We started working on via a competition in 2014, but the life of the project, of course, began long before that. There is between the kind of Capitol Riverfront area of Washington, D.C. and historic Anacostia, there were 2 bridges. First, the 11th Street Bridge, and then a second bridge that was built as part of a broader highway system. Those bridges reached the end of their lifespan and were replaced by bridges in the middle of the 2 original bridges. And there was the kind of forethought to think that the old bridge piers actually had a potential beyond just being demolished, and that they could actually form a platform for non-vehicular passage across the river, but even more than that, to make a place out over the river that could be a connection point between what were and are kind of very disparate sides of the city. And here you see the site today. So there's the current 11th Street Bridge, which is a kind of major vehicular but local road that also has a bike path and pedestrian path on its south side. And here you see then south of that, towards the bottom here, or in the kind of crack, They're the 4 piers that exist from the previous bridge. And fundamentally what we're doing is building a new bridge on top of those piers that has the scale and the depth to create a park out over the river. So here you see kind of from the Anacostia Park, which is a large park from the National Park Service that's on the east side of the river, but that is, you could say, inadequately programmed today. So today there are a series of, or these 2 viewing platforms that they've been built out over the bridge piers. And as part of the overall project, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we're going to be tearing down the caps that are on top of these piers, but then using the piers in the river themselves. Of course, part of a much larger team. WRA is our structural engineer based here in Baltimore, and the design team lead. And we're working together with 11th Street with Building Bridges Across the River, which is a nonprofit that's really spearheading the whole initiative, and also the DC Department of Transportation, or DDOT, who will ultimately own the bridge because it's a piece of public infrastructure, and of also, of course, shepherding the project through. And the funding for the project is also a mix of public money and also privately raised money together. And of course, there are many other players within DC, from the National Park Service to the Navy Yard to the Anacostia Watershed Society, who will be running the environmental education program around the park. And we've been working closely with them throughout the years. And again, long before we got involved, Building Bridges Across the River had led a really community-focused effort to determine the programming and potential of the bridge. So they began with almost innumerable public meetings of different scales to try to gauge interest from people of all ages, as you'll see, children, older adults, everyone in the community, about what they wanted from this bridge and what could be there. And that members of that initial community engagement effort also became part of the competition effort. So when we were presenting to in a number of kind of preliminary meetings for the competition process, we actually presented to a broad group, not just a small jury, a broad group of stakeholders from major institutions, but also just members of the community who weighed in and really influenced the design that you'll see today. And then that influence also continued through the process, where we presented to again, members of that same committee as we developed the design after we'd been selected over time. As I mentioned, this initiative is really about connecting 2 disparate sides of Washington, D.C., say the west side of the river and the east side of the river. The west side of the river, which you see here delineated with L'Enfant's original plan for DC, is the part of DC that everyone, of course, knows, with the Capitol and all the other monuments of the city. The east side is a more pastoral area that was left off of this plan. And that, as a result, grew more informally in contrast to the formality of L'Enfant's plan. But it also has been historically ignored by many of the resources that the city brings to the rest of Washington, D.C. So its median household income is lower. And it also represents a kind of racial divide within the city, split by the Anacostia River. And so this project is meant to be a connector across the river, but it's also linked to general initiatives to bring the health of the river to a different place.
So believe it or not, this is the Anacostia River in our nation's capital. Like many of our American rivers and streams, was heavily polluted. But what we wanted to briefly touch on, and all of this information is thanks to the Anacostia Watershed Society. Ariel Tron, who is the Director of Education, has been a key partner and collaborator really since the competition phase. Their mission is to restore and protect the Anacostia River and its watershed communities. Their vision has always been to create a swimmable and fishable Anacostia River for the health and enjoyment of the community on both sides of the river. my understanding from aerial recently is they're closer to the swimming aspect than the fishable. And we'll talk about that in a moment by 2025. So they really focus on stewardship, education, recreation, and advocacy. As you might imagine, the Anacostia watershed is part of the larger Potomac River watershed and Chesapeake Bay watershed. The sources of pollution are many, whether it be sewage, sediment, trash, nutrients, and toxins. And here's an image just of the sedimentation issues. You can see the difference between the Potomac River on the left and the Anacostia River on the right. Historically, it was 40 feet deep. Now it's in the range of 10 to 5 feet deep in certain sections. The challenge is, as you see in this diagram, is the sediments are toxic, and that's really because of all the operations that the Navy put forth in this area and the industrial waterfront that was on the west side. In fact, the Navy was at one time on both sides of the river, where Anacostia Park is today. There used to be buildings, naval buildings. So it was Anacostia Watershed Society. It was a lawsuit that was settled in 2005 that really brought about this Clean Rivers project, the combined sewer overflow issue that many cities have, including my current hometown of Philadelphia. And it has made great strides. And in fact, on our site, there is a section of this new storage that will reduce the CSO volumes by 88%. And in the future, I don't know that we're quite to 98%. This was an aspirational goal, but we're getting there. It's been a significant change in the water quality. But this is what the river looks like today as well. And so the Anacostia Watershed Society has a number of programs. They have planted mussels by the tens of thousands in the river and are making significant strides in cleansing its waters in that manner. They have educational boat tours. Ariel works with school children every day, taking them out on the river and educating them about this incredible resource. So this is a real opportunity for Jason and my team to capture this energy and build on this momentum towards creating a learning landscape and structure here at historic Anacostia. The pink line is the 11th Street Bridge Park, our site, and it used to be called the Eastern Branch. I think you can see where it's situated, but it has wonderful views to the US Capitol, but also importantly to the Frederick Douglass House, Cedar Hill, which is a National Historic Landmark in historic Anacostia on the east side of the river. As Jason described, the opportunity is to create, it's really Harriet Tregoning, the director of planning at the time, who said, why don't we repurpose these piers and create this pedestrian connection? And what's interesting to us too is the history of the site, and I may not pronounce this name correctly, but the Nacotchtank Indians called this place Anacostia, which meant Village Trading Center. So for us, for our team, that was a wonderful inspiration of working to create a place of gathering here that hovered over the water again. This historic view shows you're on the historic Anacostia side and looking back at the federal city, the buildings on the hill, high points, and then you see the beginnings of the Navy Yard along the river's edge. But as Jason noted, the east side of the river was much more agricultural and pastoral in character. And that sort of dichotomy continues in the 70s with the more industrial naval yard complex that's there today. It's a walled complex that you see on the left. And then the more residential scale of buildings. This is the Frederick Douglass home in a gathering in 1972. We understood in our early research, though, that there was a social context to this project that, thanks to urban renewal and city policies at the time, you can see the many buildings in the upper left. There were many people in the face of urban renewal who were moved out of the southwest portion of the city. 23,000 people were displaced. And this legacy lingers. This distrust of city policy is very still alive today. Many of the people moved east of the river, and they still live in wards 7 and 8, but some have been pushed out even further. And today's DC, it's very expensive to live in the city. And so that kind of population shift is happening again. And so it was really important for our team and BBAR to be proactive about how to prevent displacement in the future. Furthermore, there was the physical context. This is 295. Some of you, if you've ever been to DC, I'm sure many people here have, which really disconnects the neighborhoods from their parkland, the Anacostia Park along the river's edge. And this diagram describes the pollution. We have the CSOs, we have the landfills from Washington Gas and others, and the Kenilworth landfill that's further up the river that you can see, as well as the stormwater runoff and debris. We've been focused on human health and how can the improvement of the environment also improve human health, but also looking at these neighborhoods, we understand that they're a food desert. There's not access to fresh food. Medical care is not as readily available, and neither is access to outdoor space. So working to bring together neighborhoods from both sides of the city and of the river, rather, and there's many different neighborhoods. Often this area is referred to as Anacostia, but it's really quite incorrect because there's historic Anacostia, there's Berry Farm, Farallon, and we've worked to recognize that in the meetings, public meetings that have been held. This was an early economic context that we were looking at. These rental rates are much higher these days over the 10 years that we've been working on the project, but we'll talk a little bit further, so I'll keep moving when we talk about the equitable development plan of how to prevent displacement now as this project materializes. But as Jason noted, Scott Kratz, who's seen in the upper left with the mayor, Bowser, I believe, touring some of New York's parks, really worked to engage the community. This is very much a community-based project, as Jason described, how some of these key champions for the project have stayed with the effort. And they had developed these 4 goals to re-engage the residents with the river, to reconnect the communities that had historically been separated, to improve public health and address disparities, and to serve as an anchor for inclusive economic opportunity long-term. These were inspirational images that we found. There had been some high school students had made some wonderful models that you can see here, one of those. And this idea of not only connecting east to west, but then creating these series of destinations along the way. And this opportunity, again, to reach out and over the waters was quite exciting, dwelling in a new way on the Anacostia River. The community came up with this program, all of these ideas which would keep the place would attract people to this place and keep it very active 24/7, or at least early in the morning to early in the evening. And then the potential for all the events that could be held here. And so in the competition, these were just some early sketches that I drew. And really the top ones were this idea of the two, recognizing that the two sides of the river had a very different character. So there's sort of a partie, if you will, and then this desire to connect the two. But really thinking about at a very basic level, this idea of how to make this an accessible place as well. We then moved to modeling, which is always very helpful to our process, and how to make this place, again, that's up and over the water's edge and stretches back into the communities on both sides. No, put it back to Jason.
So as Hallie mentioned, as we started to really look at how to think our way through together this the design itself, we wanted to come up with a very direct and simultaneously accessible connection and gathering place out over the river. And so what we did in the end was really just to literally take two accessible slopes and extend one from each side of the river, and then allow them to intersect, creating a new public space out over the river. But also allowing those to extend out and over, creating a multi-layered park that extends from the water all the way to the sky, you could say. So here, kind of abstract illustration of the bridge piers, and imagining a kind of platform from the west and then a platform from the east. They could come together and intertwine even out over the river. And then here, the kind of vision of the park itself, which is obviously then where landscape and program is introduced across its length to bring people from one side to the other, but also create a public space in an unexpected territory. And here you see looking up the river. The simple shape of the bridge also facilitated a number of different potentials, we thought, right from the beginning. So it captures a kind of gateway from one side to the other. But it also has, of course, a kind of quite noticeable form of this X that marks the spot of where we imagined a new public life within DC. And that X denoted someplace we thought civic, especially in DC itself, where L'Enfant's plan itself has a series of intersections, the reservations that mark the main, let's say, iconic moments and public spaces from the Capitol to other major green spaces as well. And we thought the simplicity of its form could maybe help this new public space in DC hold its own against the monuments that were already there, and maybe give us a place that we could be a little permanent. It also makes, as I mentioned, a kind of multi-layered space, and the top layer is a space where you can get vantage points to look out and understand where you are. How I already mentioned, you can get views of the Capitol, but you can also get views back to the Frederick Douglass House and historic Anacostia. And we thought that getting above the river was also important. So at the west end, there's what we call the running track, although I don't know how many people are going to run there. But anyway, hopefully many people will walk there, and you can get a vantage point out again to the Capitol and the rest of the west side of the river, and even enjoy the fireworks. But on the east side, there's a large lawn with a view down the river and also back to Anacostia. DC is, of course, a very hot place, and so this multi-layered approach also provides something very important, we thought, which is shade. And it also gave us a kind of depth that worked well for the potential new structure that would rest on the existing bridge piers. So by stitching the two sides of the X together, we could form effectively a cantilever bridge structure, which you see demonstrated here. That would be, and we thought, the most effortless way to make the structure itself. So you see that here. So there's effectively on either side trusses that connect or stitch together the upper and lower decks of the bridge park, providing additional structural depth and also supporting the upper layers of the bridge. Of course, the structure, it seems quite effortless to just stick the structure, the bridge on top of these existing bridge piers, but it's very complicated. And because of certain other moves we made, we had to add a little structure here and there as well. And if I hear the phrase scour report one more time, I'm going to go crazy. But anyway, we found a path, and it's working well. And also, one of the main advantages of reusing the bridge piers was simply avoiding all the complexities that come in trying to do new structure in a waterway, which may add another decade or two to our process here. In our case, also, the structure helps frame views through the river, but also give a sense of enclosure as you move across the bridge as well. We also wanted to have hammocks on the truss, but they wouldn't let us do it. So, but anyway, there's a hammock grove that Hallie will talk about as well. And then this layering also helps us incorporate program into the bridge. So not just places to relax, which are also important and a critical part, but also places where we could make particular things happen. And we wanted the bridge to be a kind of active and almost urban place. So almost like the Rialto Bridge in Venice, which combines a passage with also shopping. In our case, we have a little bit of a twist to a similar idea. So here you see the overall section of the bridge. As I mentioned, ultimately it's a combination of two platforms that are at a 4.76% slope to give ourselves a little bit of construction tolerance, but to maintain an accessible path all along the route back and forth. But the life of the bridge itself also extends down, as we'll describe, especially onto the east side of the river, where there's an environmental education center and an amphitheater and a whole really kind of new park that Hallie's designed on that side of the river on terra firma. So I'll show you just briefly the plan. So as I mentioned already, on the east side of the river, there's an environmental education center. There's a triangular shaped building that's shaped to look down the river. There's also a kayak launch and an amphitheater. And then on the west side of the river, the whole bridge tapers in order to meet the city, but also it flares out towards the east to accommodate these larger programs that you'll see on the side of the river where we thought they were the most needed. So this is a plan of the lower decks, where you see again on the east side this environmental education center, but also now the river amphitheater and the kayak launch. Maybe I can point. Yes. Okay, here we go. There's also a play area, which again we placed on this side of the river so it would be most readily accessible from the east. And then there's a cafe and community porch in the middle where the two platforms meet. There's a central plaza space that's a flexible space where different things could happen, or a market or a wedding or who knows what. And then towards the west, the bridge tapers down and a path that runs through it is flanked by a picnic garden and hammock area and other green spaces that bring kind of green infrastructure, you could say, to what is otherwise actually a pretty hard part of the city. This big path you see is also has to serve for emergency vehicles, which again, we really wanted to be much narrower than it is. But anyway, it has to be 15 feet wide. We were told a million times. So that's how it is. But anyway, and in accommodating those emergency vehicles also shaped, as I'll show you later, a bit of how we had to make things like guardrails work, et cetera. So this, of course, on top of this are the upper decks, and the upper decks form on the east side, what's called the Anacostia Lookout and the Great Lawn. So kind of the most lush or most open, you could say, green space where you could do yoga or other things. And then on the west side, the Capitol Lookout or running track that I showed you before. So here the program that I've just described, but I think it's important to note though that one of the great things that happened, I think, after the competition was that the idea of the limits of the bridge was allowed to extend, or the bridge park was allowed to extend further south. So all of this green territory here was not really part of the initial idea, although, I mean, in the competition, we stretched the boundaries. But in terms of what the kind of assumed project would be, this was not originally part of it, but I think is a really critical part because Good Hope Road, which connects into downtown Anacostia, has to pass under this highway overpass. It's not the most inviting route you ever took. And really extending the life and programming of the bridge park further towards downtown Anacostia, I think, is one of the great gestures that we've made, and adding additional program along the Anacostia Park, which is the larger National Park Service park on the east side of the river. It's also, I think, a great contribution. So I'm going to walk across a bit of the programming on the bridge. We connect on the west side to the walk that runs alongside the Navy Yard wall, and also then further along the river. Up this, as I mentioned, 15-foot wide path that takes you up through what becomes a sort of gateway towards the east. And then now you're looking back towards the west in this main central plaza. One of the things that I think as a team we've had to deal with is just the implications of trying to make continuously sloped surface and rationalizing it now and then into something that could be flat and therefore programmable and occupiable, and trying to do that in a way that feels effortless when you're on the bridge itself. So you see a little bit of transition, some of those transitions here into this main plaza area. Beyond the plaza, underneath the east side upper deck is a cafe. And in a way, the layering, as I mentioned, facilitates program just in the simple way that it creates a roof for a space like this cafe. The cafe also houses a community room, so it's meant to be a flexible space that can be used by the community at large, while at the same time it of course provides food and restrooms as well for the park. To the east of that is a large covered porch. So an area underneath the Anacostia lookout and great lawn that can be an open, shaded space where people can come and do all kinds of different things. And it's directly adjacent also to the playground that you see here on your right, where you can, so people can, adult parents can hang out and watch the kids play, watch their kids play. And the porch itself, we imagine, is a space where there can be markets and there can be events at night. And having the roof above you not only protects you from the elements, but can also facilitate all different kinds of parties. So here, now we're further to the east, looking out over the Environmental Education Center and then the rest of the Bridge Park. So this Environmental Education Center is shaped like a triangle, in part to give some breathing room and provide for a lower level plaza that I'll show you. But it also is a gesture to direct the building and its views up the river. This is a two-level building that will house an education spaces run by the Anacostia Watershed Society. It also has at the top the offices and administrative areas for the Bridge Park itself. So here you're now hovering over the kind of Anacostia lookout and the Great Lawn, looking down at this Environmental Education Center on your left, and then the amphitheater on your right. It's, as I mentioned, a two-story building that intersects with the entry point of the bridge, and the other part of the, you could say, square that's cut to make the triangle becomes a void in the bridge that looks down into a main secondary plaza along the bridge. There's also adjacent to it the central utility plant, the CUP, not the most romantic name, but a building we need for storage and other things, but the roof of which we've transformed into an urban agriculture space. So here you see the plan of the lowest level of the Environmental Education Center, which houses a gallery space and a main flexible hall that can be used for different educational purposes, in addition to the main science classroom. So it's a very simple building, but one that we hope through its engagement with both the river and the bridge be a very dynamic place. And then above that, there are offices and also park restrooms. And then finally, a roof that will house solar panels, but also kind of directs water towards the east, towards a rain garden. So here you're on the bridge, looking at what is really will be the main entry point on the bridge in many ways, at this two-level, very simple triangular building that opens up to a plaza that you're looking down on. And then now here you're on the plaza itself, and we're trying to make the facade at this level completely operable so that when the Watershed Society is bringing school children here, there's a kind of easy in and out between events that can happen outdoors and indoors, and also a path from the education spaces that happen within to the river itself, where they can do more hands-on education. And then here you're actually standing on the kayak launch, looking back up, where again, this kind of multi-level building draws you in. Then here inside the main flex hall, so above you on the right is a bridge, effectively a bridge within a bridge that connects the entry to the bridge park to the park itself. And then on the upper left would be the park offices. We've tried to keep the materiality of this building very clean and clear with concrete and wood, but also hopefully a mural that will help with the kind of soft mural that will help with the acoustics of the space, and also shields the classroom spaces behind. And here a view from looking down at the Environmental Education Center and the so-called CUP with the urban agriculture on its stepped roofs. This is a building that we actually added kind of out of necessity towards the end and tried to shape in a way that it could serve its main functions, which is housing lawnmowers and mechanical equipment, but also could be itself also a kind of resource for the community. And also a building that could step out of the way to preserve kind of really nice views from the top of the vehicular bridge and the paths for bicyclists out over to the Frederick Douglass Bridge that is to the south. So we, at a certain point in the project, of course, doing a bridge, you're not in control of what's happening in terms of the main look of the bridge, because it's dominated by the structural engineer that you only have limited ability to control. But we tried to work hard to kind of keep the expression of the bridge and all of its different components as clear and clean as possible. So working to try to define key elements and key dimensions, and also keeping things consistent, while also allowing the structure to be efficient as well. One of the main elements that you could say defines the clean lines of the bridge and this X that is its shape is the guardrail that runs, of course, continuously across from both sides. We wanted that guardrail to be simple, but also to avoid a kind of series of vertical pickets that might undermine the reading of the two lines. So it's a kind of simple galvanized honeycomb, effectively, of galvanized steel, the 3-inch spacing, so that everything is code compliant. So you see that here, while maintaining kind of porosity of view from it. It's just something very simple, but with a combination of this honeycomb and then also the solid plate that you see here at the bottom allows us to adapt to various different thicknesses and conditions and kinks across the bridge, so that the overall effect is consistent, and we can handle things ranging from moments where you're going to have vehicles on the bridge to moments where you have limited depth but only pedestrians. So you can sort of get a sense of that here, because the buildup across the bridge varies as you move across it. Some places we have space for greenery. Sometimes we have no buildup at all, and where this fascia effectively conceals all of that, as well as the kinks of landings. We very subtly are trying to differentiate the two kind of runs of the bridge by shifting the horizontal members of this grid either backwards or forwards to emphasize the verticals or horizontals of the different parts of the guardrail itself. So that on one side you have a kind of vertical accent and on the other a horizontal accent. So trying to help maintain the clarity of the two sides coming together while not undermining the sense that they are actually creating a conjunction and joining two disparate parts of the city. So here you see the kind of mock-ups of these. So looked at head on, they're nearly identical. But then as you look at a glancing view, which of course is the main way that you'll see them as you move across the bridge, there's a subtle differentiation from verticality for the one on the left and horizontality from the one on the right. An effect that's of course enhanced once light is applied from an integrated guardrail, handrail. We've kind of echoed this grid and some of the other materials that are across the bridge using this green FRP as an accent on key elements of the other buildings. So in elements areas of the cafe where we need to provide shielding for restrooms or the kitchen, as well as areas of the environmental education center where there are solid parts, despite what we're trying to do as a kind of main openness. So for example, here in this plaza, you see actually the kitchen accented by this green FRP on the right. Whereas in the EEC, it steps up to mark the entrance to the restrooms that are in the building.
Again, trying to make that connection across the river and bring the two sides together. Anacostia Park is a very open park. There's barely a tree on the east, even though they have some facilities there. So we were working to try to make this a more layered landscape, but of course, we're limited in our footprint. So this is really meant to be a demonstration project that might hopefully influence future projects in this area of the city. And this idea of interconnecting and giving each side a little bit of the other, which was what we really heard from the community first and foremost. Culminating, as Jason said, in the center with that plaza, but then really trying to make this neighborhood connection to the south stronger with the river amphitheater. It's situated and has beautiful views of the river, really downriver. The stepping stones of program that will attract and bring people here from all over the city and region, understanding the pedestrian connections, really increasing the amount of pedestrian connections here, as you can see at a glance. And really providing that vital connection between the waterfront trails that exist on either side. So this will really be a hub and a moment of pause on the river that will encourage walking, running, and biking, as well as the kayak activity on the river itself. Working to, again, expand the Environmental Education Center. This is meant to be a teaching landscape for their programs and for the school children who visit will be taken through this landscape and then taken out on the river. As I said before, we have a pollinator meadow over most of the site and as many shade trees as we could propose. Working with mostly native, some adapted plantings. Again, just trying to increase the coverage and the ability to infiltrate water. It's part of the stormwater management, but also having these moments of shade that be critical really to the use and attraction in this place. Given the climate that we all know very well here in Baltimore is very much like Washington, D.C. As I said, it's part of the stormwater management system. So it's very much a performative landscape. We collect the stormwater in these 2 cisterns and then reuse it for irrigation on site. And now I'm going to take you from a walk on the historic Anacostia side to the other, towards the Navy Yard. This is a wonderful work of art. We had a process that identified 5 different locations in the park for artists. And this is a local artist by the name of Martha Jackson Jarvis Studio. She and her daughter have crafted this vision for sunset sunrise portal that is inspired by the landscape, the future landscape itself. It'll be a wonderful way to greet people as they come into the park. Really trying to create, I'm afraid the X has taken over here a little bit, but this idea of a green amphitheater that has shade trees. And this will be a wonderful place for BBAR they have the Washington Performing Arts Society is one of their key nonprofits that's part of the consortium there, is working to program this. So we'll have community events throughout the seasons, throughout the year. And just the opportunity to take in the beauty of Jason's Bridge and the river itself. The opportunity to, as I said, interpret this pollinator meadow in particular for school children, and the hopes that we will have rangers, and part of the maintenance will be run by BBAR to ensure that it's well maintained and beautiful throughout the year. The opportunity to get out on the river in a kayak or canoe, and the Anacostia Watershed Society will be running this program as well. This is the play area, and we were inspired by their muscle power program and the success of that to use as really inspiration for the forms of the play area, these sort of muscle shapes, making it very physically engaging, giving children the opportunity to climb and run and slide. And they've got, I think, as of 2023, they have 35,000 mussels in the river, which is really making a significant impact positively to the water quality there. It's really incredible. Again, this view, that view I showed you in the beginning of Anacostia, this is that view, and how the Bridge Park will capture that view. It'll be a wonderful place for sunsets, watching the water, the light glimmer, shimmer over the water, looking towards Yards Park, the Hammock Grove, and then a walk back down to the Navy Yard. Jason?
Oh, well, so this last part where we, after we won the competition, of course, we're very happy, but almost immediately the kind of potential implications of gentrification kind of came at us. We were both just trying to make a nice place for the neighborhood itself, but but we actually found that almost immediately real estate agents started including our early renders of the bridge in advertisements, obviously hinting that something like the High Line was coming and who knew what would happen to property values. And so there was a whole period where we had to send kind of cease and desist or something that looked like a cease and desist at these people to try to tell them to not do this, because we didn't want to be the face of what is a real issue even beyond the presence of the bridge, of gentrification in this area that's as Washington D.C. is exploding. So one of the great, oh well, maybe.
Okay. So as we said before, Building Bridges Across the River is the 501c3 nonprofit that organization that manages the ARC, which stands for Town Hall Education Arts and Rec Center. And again, it's got the Washington Ballet, it's got the Washington Performing Arts Center. It provides not only recreational opportunity, but educational and social services as well. This is just the project timeline that we keep revising, but we're very excited that we will be breaking ground this time next year. And we have worked to prepare the necessary construction documents, as you can imagine, which are under review. We have full approval from CFA, SHPO, and NCPC, all the regulatory agencies, but the further sort of building permit review. But you can see here, this was the first effort by Scott Kratz from Building Bridges Across the River and Vaughn Perry, who was running the equitable development plan, getting the data for each side of the river in the various wards. And you can see how different the sides of the river are. And I think the particularly interesting percentages are the childhood poverty at 73% east of the river, really pretty shocking unemployment. And then the renter occupied units are about the same, but you can see the great differential in the housing costs. However, as Jason mentioned, there's great pressure. This is sort of the new frontier real estate wise. And we really want to, Scott really has been at the forefront of trying to prevent displacement so that everybody we've been working with who helped us envision this so well will have the benefit of actually staying in place and enjoying the park long term. We were able to participate in some of these early meetings, but it was really the community members, the design oversight and design review committee members, that's Arnell in the upper left, who is very passionate about the project still. And they really informed sort of the three pillars of the equitable development plan, which are small business enterprise, affordable housing, and we'll see that the third is escaping me at the moment. But what was key to the plan is measuring the impact. And I want to give credit to Mary Bogle from Urban Institute, who has worked with the BBAR team, with Kia Johnson, who's the manager of the Equitable Development Plan currently, and Vaughn Perry before her, on how to set this up. So looking at affordable housing, they created this Douglas CLT as the Community Land Trust, which is partly run, I think, sort of 50-50 by the community members themselves. And you can see the data there, 122 new Ward 8 homeowners and 7,540 who have learned about the land trust and all it has to offer. So really trying to build home ownership. Also the small business enterprise. I think one of the art projects too is this kiosk that will be on the Bridge Park, but the kiosk will also sort of an incubator for young businesses from wards 7 and 8. And it will also, what I found interesting, be taken around the city of Washington too. So they have a larger reach, which I think is a really wonderful idea. I didn't know if you had heard that. It's great.
Yeah, and they're building it now before the bridge. I mean, because it's small. But anyway,
Right. Workforce development trading, which is already happening. And what's interesting is Vaughn Perry, who was the Equitable Development Manager, has now moved to Skyland Workforce Center to really take the next step in his career and really realize some of these programs hands-on again. But through his work and Kia's work and Scott's, this idea of social equity came about, the need to really focus on preserving local culture for these neighborhoods east of the river. And this idea of cultural resiliency is something that I've really, and Jason, we've learned a lot from their team and will continue to do so. So arts and culture is very important to the project. And I want to invite everybody, as Scott would have us do, May 20th, 2023, come to the River Festival. It's a wonderful time. It's been going on all these years, garnering interest and getting people out on the river front and giving them a chance to be out on the water itself. It's a wonderful time, great food and music. I guess even before the projects even had a shovel in the ground, we've done an amazing job with the Bridge Park Plots program that builds community gardens on both sides of the river to offer fresh food, which also translated into this Taste of the Harvest event every fall, giving children the opportunity to learn about fruits and vegetables. And then these leadership and empowerment workshops, really amazing work. That's Vaughn, sort of 4 people in. He's a great guy and has really been a wonderful partner. So these were all their lessons learned with regards to the equitable development plan. We've learned a lot from them. It's just a wonderful team, and it'll be interesting to see how it progresses in the future. And with that, I think we've come to the end. I want to thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much.
No? Oh, better now. We have an opportunity for a few questions. Does anybody have any questions? I can grab a mic and pass that around.
Oh, no, I'll get on the other side.
Oh, no.
Here, I'm coming to you in the middle.
This is yours. I'm not doing it right now.
Is this working? Yes. Vision is so critical, and this project is great to have Harriet and Scott. Can you speak a little bit about vision and why it's important as you take over from an architectural and landscape architecture point of view?
Yeah, well, yes, it's definitely critical to have a real, to have a vision ahead of you. I mean, obviously we wouldn't have ever been anywhere near such a project or have conceived it ourselves without the vision that to keep the bridge piers and do something with them, and the effort that I think Scott did to make that something that felt like it emerged from the community, so that it could also continue to have community support. I mean, again, we've been working on it off and on for 9 years, but we're also doing other things. So also just the vision and fortitude that people at the nonprofit like Scott Kratz have to continue pushing the project forward, I think is.
I'll just add that Scott's been a tireless champion, obviously, and very dedicated and forward thinking. We've learned a lot from him for sure. At Olin, I know. And I would say too, at the time, it was just very forward thinking I think he did something like 200 community meetings, or he really went to community meetings that were already happening. So I think the lesson here too is that every community has its network, its passionate activists and people who are trying to make things better for everyone. And so how does one tap into that network, which is what the job of B-Bar is. And I think they've done an incredible job. And it's just wonderful also to learn that even before the first shovel goes in the ground, thinking forward with regards to equitable development, but also that projects, landscape projects, architecture projects can be catalysts for positive change and help continue the energy and momentum that the community has brought forth.
Could you please talk about, I think I'm familiar with the area where this is located, and the 295 is going along the river. And even in your rendering there, 295 cuts off Anacostia from this part. It's the freeway is a much bigger wall or dividing element. So can you discuss how you get from the right of that rendering to the community, which?
Well, yeah.
Do you want to?
Well, yes, this is Good Hope Road here, and then the highway is here, and you have to go underneath the highway. There's an underpass where pedestrians and vehicles can go. So that's the typical way that you end up coming down. You can also walk along the riverfront, and it connects actually over to the Anacostia metro stop as well. So there's a kind of different way to get here. But the main route is through this underpass, and they've done some things to install art into the underpass as well and improve the lighting and kind of you could say, typical kind of underpass improvement efforts. And I think that those have helped the situation. But the main thing is just that I think that what we're doing in bringing the park and the kind of newly active park down closer to where the underpass terminates will also help, draw you there. And the more it's used, the better it will feel. But I mean, best case would be that there was no freeway, but
Right. There's also
but
a
it's there.
sidewalk along the 11th Street vehicular bridge today. Jason, maybe you could just,
yeah, here
right,
there's a used but not so shaded
right.
path that pedestrians can use and also bicyclists can use that will come down, and that currently comes down to Good Hope Road via a path that we're keeping in place. So from the west side of the river, you can take the bridge itself, but also to get quickly across, you can come across this way, and it also then further connects. But it's one of the big challenges of the project, and one of the reasons why the existing park is not, could be much more active, but it's hard. There's a freeway in the way. So,
And what we would really love is to have this project realized and then have that energy continue under the highway into MLK and Good Hope Road. But there's already there, and they were part of our competition team. Arts Development Corporation has been there for a long time, creating the historic Anacostia Art Center, the En Gallery, many other art programs that reach out to the community. So if we can just go a little bit further with some of this energy, I think it would be very transformative, in addition to some other efforts that the city is planning for this area.
You mentioned the metro stop. So how far is it from the metro stop to the side?
Yeah, it's about a 10-minute walk on the Anacostia side. It is more of a 20-minute walk on the other side, 25 maybe. But you have the whole Capitol Riverfront that you can walk through. And the Navy Yard does allow public access. And they've been part of this process too. There's been so many, the city owns the bottom of the river. The DDOT owns the air rights over the piers. The National Park Service is involved because of Anacostia Park. You've got the Navy on the other side. You've got the Army Corps of Engineers for the whole river, and then you've got the Coast Guard channel up the middle. So there's been a lot of people to coordinate with, as you might imagine.
yeah. Well, one thing too over here by the Navy Yard. So this is a pretty active and used path along the river, and the area just to the south, you could say, of the Navy Yard has been developing like gangbusters from Nats Park all the way up to here, and to get from the park that's here, that park. Well, anyway, to get from there to here to the park, our park is not such a stretch.
Right, the Capitol River.
Yeah, from the Capitol River.
Could you speak a little more about how you plan to assess the equity impact of the project?
Well, that's why I mentioned Mary Bogle from Urban Institute has set up this metric system that she's designed with Scott and Vaughn and Kia. We're not in charge of the equitable development program, but we thought we wanted to mention it today because we think it's such a wonderful program that many other projects across the country are learning from. And so I really can't speak to that in detail. But I'd be happy to put you in touch with her.
So you don't
Or
know
Scott.
what exactly they're going to measure to assess the equity?
Well, they're measuring those sort of 3 key focus areas, affordable housing, small business enterprise, and I keep forgetting the third. Workforce
yeah.
development. Thank you.
Yeah. I think one of the good story, I mean, again, we didn't do it, but the whole equitable development plan and the project as a whole is drawn also a lot of funding and fundraising towards those efforts and towards the Home Buyers Club and the workforce training and other initiatives that are all geared towards trying to help people stay in place and help people be involved even in the construction, for example, of the bridge or
The
other efforts too.
LISC, which is Local Initiative Support Corporation, gave 50 million to the project before the project was actually funded for equitable development because of the task force work. And the task force, while it involved the community, it also involved the city. So it was a public-private partnership that developed the plan. And they have a number of, more detailed strategies and goals. But I'd be happy to put you in touch with Scott and Kia, who could speak to that in detail. Yeah.
Thinking about vehicles now, there's a lot of traffic. There might be a lot of big, heavy noise that are crossing bigger bridges, a little higher. So the first question is, were there any, or was it possible to do any noise mitigation? Mitigate that. And I'm not sure that I see parking, was that intentionally not part of the project?
Well, I'll speak to this parking first. So what they're trying to do, it's intentionally not part of the project in the sense that we didn't want to build a parking garage next to the park, but what they have done is try to work out arrangements with nearby parking garages on both sides of the river so that so that there's ready park access. So they're kind of agreements with a parking garage that's up over here, and then another one that's in more closer to downtown Anacostia and the metro station as well, of course, too. To try to facilitate that, so if people are coming by car, they can do that. But of course, they want to encourage people to come by metro or come by bike or any other way.
There's also a lot of parking in Anacostia Park north. And to Jason's point, the parking garage is at the corner in historic Anacostia, is right at those crossroads of Good Hope Road and MLK. So if someone arrives there, then the hope would be that they would spend time with the businesses, restaurants, shops, and things there, as well as at the Bridge Park.
Yeah, well, and one of the smart things about this river festival they've been doing is it's a little bit of a trial run for doing stuff there and getting people there, and also getting them used to the idea that you could take the metro to Anacostia and walk the 10 minutes across in a beautiful day, and it's not so bad. But and then the road, the local bridge that's here, is actually not above our bridge. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. It depends on where you are on our bridge. But we're really we didn't want to erect barriers, and actually there are different reasons why we couldn't. But the landscaping and the structure of the bridge will help mitigate to a certain extent sound from the bridge. And there's also a guardrail and barrier on the local bridge. But you will at times hear the bridge. That's one of the reasons why also we moved a planned amphitheater that was going to be on the bridge. We moved it onto terra firma for cost reasons too, but also because it would help better. But I think in the end, if you've ever been to Hudson River Park, that's just adjacent to the West Side Highway in Manhattan, that's also a space that has actually much faster and consistent traffic than actually this 11th Street vehicular bridge does. And I think the presence of the park and the activities within it somehow managed to meld together with that vehicular traffic too. So, how close is the bigger bridge? This? I don't know the dimension of this, but it must be, I don't know, 300 feet or 150 feet or something. I don't know.
That's the Southwest Freeway Bridge?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the regional traffic. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Hallie and Jason, for joining us this evening. Thank you. This is our 45th annual Baltimore. More information about our speakers and about our sponsors can be found online at aaabaltimore.org. Our next event and last event in the lecture series is going to happen on May 5th, right here at the Alerter Center. It's also going to be at 6 p.m. So if you haven't registered, the event is free. Go to that website, aaabaltimore.org, and look at our Eventbrite. Go ahead, you had a question? May 5th. May 4th. Apologies. May 4th at the Alerta Center. If you haven't signed up, we are offering 1.5 CEU continuing education credits for this lecture and for all of our lectures in the lecture series. So if you can visit the tables outside and sign up to get those CEU credits. And we will continue this affair across the street. We have a reception, and thank you all for joining us.